Welcome to What the F Happened, Fraud and Financial Crime Deconstructed, a Defend podcast where we break down what's actually happening across fraud, scams, AML, and financial crime.
Each episode cuts through the noise to explain the tactics, trends, and real-world impact behind the headlines, so you're better prepared for what comes next. Let's get into it.
We're digging into the latest newsletter and insights from DataVisor. And honestly, the story that comes out of all this, it's a high-stakes race.
It really is.
You've got threat actors on one side using Gen AI, crypto mixers, the works. And then on the other side, you have regulators who are they're done asking nicely.
They're demanding what they call proactive detection.
And that word proactive, that feels like the key to this whole thing.
Oh, absolutely. That one word is doing a lot of heavy lifting. It's basically the end of an era where you could just report fraud after the fact and write it off.
Like the cost of doing business.
Exactly. The new expectation is that you catch it before the money is gone.
So that's our mission today. We are going to unpack how the rules of money are changing right now with a huge deadline just a few weeks away. We'll get into why speed is the new compliance currency and how tech like unsupervised machine learning is actually saving companies millions.
It's this wild convergence of policy and some pretty hardcore engineering.
So let's start with the calendar. March 20, 2026. If you're in U.S. banking, that date should be circled in red.
That's phase one of the new Nacha rules. And yeah, we get rule updates all the time, but this one feels different.
How so?
It's the mandate itself. It applies to any high-volume institution, and it requires, quote, risk-based processes. But the real change is the target. They're explicitly going after what they call false pretenses.
Okay, this is a really crucial distinction because for years, fraud systems were built to stop hackers, right? Account takeovers, stolen passwords.
Unauthorized access, correct. Yeah. False pretenses is a totally different beast.
This is where the customer themselves is tricked into sending the money.
Exactly. It's authorized push payment fraud, or APP. So the customer logs in, they pass the biometrics, they click send. They're doing it all themselves, but it's because they're being manipulated.
The classic romance scam or a fake investment.
Or the grandparent in jail call. For a legacy system, that's a nightmare. The transaction looks completely legitimate, the device is right, the IP is familiar, but the intent is fraudulent.
And this is where the liability starts to shift.
Right. Nacha is saying the receiving banks, the RDFIs, can't just claim ignorance anymore because the login was good. They are now on the hook for detecting that scam.
So if all the technical signals are clean, what are you even looking for? The notes break this down into 3 pillars. First one is monitoring inbound credits.
This flips the whole model on its head. For decades, banks have looked at money leaving. The question was always, is my customer being drained?
Sure.
Now they have to monitor money coming in. They have to watch for accounts that are being used as money mules.
So you're looking for an account that, say, usually gets 1 paycheck a month.
And suddenly it's getting 10 small transfers from 10 different banks in an hour. That's a mule signal. The new rule says you have to be able to flag that inbound traffic to choke off the fraud network.
Got it. Okay, pillar 2. Standardized descriptors. This sounds bureaucratic.
It does, haha. It sounds like paperwork, but it's actually an infrastructure play. It's a data quality mandate.
What do you mean?
The rule is forcing specific tags like payroll or purchase into the transaction data. Unstructured data is the enemy of automation, If every transaction is labeled differently, your AI models just see noise.
So by forcing standard tags, you're cleaning up the data so the algorithms can actually work in real time.
Precisely. And that brings us to the third pillar, which feels like a legal bear trap. The standard shift.
This is the one that has the lawyers worried, I bet.
Oh, yeah. The standard of liability is moving away from the old, vague, commercially reasonable language.
Which gives you a lot of gray area in court.
A ton. It's a shield. But the new standard requires documented, annually reviewed procedures. That creates an audit trail. If you miss a huge fraud ring, the regulator can come in and say, show me your procedure from last year's review.
And if you can't prove you updated your defenses against the latest threats,
you're negligent.
It kills the set it and forget it model of fraud prevention.
You have to prove you're watching the watchers. It's a continuous cycle.
Okay, so that's the U.S. Let's widen the lens a bit. The source material suggests Europe is even further ahead on this. The phrase that kept popping up was, speed is compliance.
It is. Europe is almost always a leading indicator for U.S. regulation. And right now, they're penalizing the latency of detection. It's not enough to eventually file a suspicious activity report.
So filing it 3 weeks later is now a failure in itself.
It's becoming a regulatory liability, yes. And this connects to a really fascinating point in the notes about AML fines. You'd think the biggest fines come from, just missing the money laundering. Your AI wasn't smart enough.
But that's not it.
It's not what the data shows. The number one cause of fines is data hygiene.
The silo problem.
The classic silo problem. The credit card division is on one system, checking is on another, mortgages on a third. The AI model might be brilliant, but if it can't see the transaction from the other department for 24 hours because of a batch process, it fails.
Regulators are basically taxing technical debt.
They are. And this becomes critical when you look at new powers like instant asset freezing. Authorities can now demand assets be frozen before a conviction.
Whoa, that is an aggressive power.
Incredibly. And to do that without getting sued by your own customer, you need absolute confidence in your data. You have to verify everything in near real time. If you have to wait for a human to pull records from 3 systems, the money's gone.
It's like regulators are demanding that banks operate with the speed of a tech company. Which brings us to crypto.
And specifically stablecoins. Yeah, we've got some notes here from a webinar that really dug into this.
Stablecoins are such a paradox, aren't they? The name sounds safe, but the source calls them a double-edged sword for compliance teams.
Well, you can see the business appeal. High transaction volume. You start processing stablecoins, your metrics shoot through the roof. It looks like incredible growth.
The risk doesn't scale linearly. It's exponential.
Exactly. Because of what they call the wash and layer capability, you can mine stablecoins with mixers. It's almost the perfect vehicle for breaking that chain of custody. A mixer just tumbles crypto from thousands of sources and spits it back out.
And it's all decentralized, so it's not like you can just call up another bank in the network.
Right. That's the challenge. But the counter argument is that the blockchain itself, it's a public, transparent ledger. So a really sophisticated team can actually see more than with a traditional SWIFT transfer.
But only if you have the tools to actually read the chain.
That's the catch. If you're just treating a stablecoin deposit like cash, you're completely blind to its history. And if that coin just came out of a known mixer, you need to be able to flag it instantly.
Okay, so the pressure is immense. The complexity is off the charts. Let's pivot to the solution side. How are companies actually fighting back? There's a case study in here about a buy now, pay later provider, a BNPL company.
BNPL is the perfect stress test, right? The time you have to make a decision is practically zero. You're at checkout, you click buy, that decision has to be made in milliseconds.
And this provider was getting hammered by new fraud rings. Their old rules-based system couldn't keep up. So they switched to unsupervised machine learning. Can you just give us the plain English version of what that means?
Sure. So the standard model is supervised learning. You train it on history, you show it 100,000 examples of last year's fraud, and say, find more stuff that looks just like this.
So it's great at catching attacks you already know about.
It's a fantastic pattern matcher for the past. The problem is, fraudsters invent new attacks. An unsupervised model works differently. It doesn't need historical labels. It just looks at all the raw data and clusters it. It's designed to say, I don't know what this group is, but it is behaving statistically differently than 99% of everyone else.
So it's spotting the anomaly based on pure behavior. It's like seeing someone walking backward in a crowd. You don't need a rule against walking backward to know that it's weird.
That's a perfect analogy. And for this BNPL provider, that capability was worth $36 million in prevented fraud.
That is a huge number.
Yeah.
But the metric that really jumped out at me was the 74% recall rate against emerging rings. What exactly is a recall rate?
Recall is basically the model's ability to find all the bad stuff. So a 74% recall rate against emerging rings means they caught roughly 3 out of every 4 attacks from brand new fraud rings the system had never, ever seen before.
Wow.
That is the power of this approach, catching the unknown unknowns.
And they did this while reducing false positives by 41%. That's usually the trade-off, isn't it?
It is. Normally, you tighten security, you end up blocking more real customers. Here, because the model is looking at subtle behaviors, not just blunt rules, it got much better at telling the difference between a weird but good customer and an actual fraudster.
Which led to a 5x improvement in review efficiency for their team. And that brings us to the human element. You still need an analyst in the loop.
You do, but their job is changing. The notes describe an analyst's day as hunting for a needle in a haystack of widgets. It's just a recipe for burnout.
And the tool to fix this is something called an interactive investigation checklist. The word checklist sounds a little basic.
Haha, it does, but this thing is dynamic. It's adaptive. If the AI flags a transaction for, say, a crypto velocity alert, the checklist automatically generates the specific steps for investigating crypto velocity. If it's a mismatched IP, the steps completely change.
It guides the analyst.
Exactly, and it has zero hunt navigation. So if a step says check device fingerprint, you click it and it takes you right to that data. No more toggling between 5 different browser windows.
The feature that seems almost like science fiction, though, is the auto-generated summaries.
This is where they use Gen AI to actually write the investigation report. After the analyst finishes the checklist, the system synthesizes all the findings into a perfect, standardized narrative.
Which is huge for regulators.
Yeah.
They want to see that same logic applied every single time.
It creates consistency, and it frees up the analyst to focus on the hard decisions, not the typing. This all ties back to an article in the source material from Yinglian Ji. She argues that fraud teams have to stop being the Department of No.
And become a growth driver instead.
Right. If you centralize your tools and monitoring across fraud, cyber, and compliance, you're not just stopping bad guys, you're approving more good customers faster, you're reducing friction.
But there's a huge disconnect between that vision and what's actually happening. Let's talk about this readiness gap.
This is the bucket of cold water. There's a survey of AML and fraud leaders, and the numbers are, well, they're concerning. 74% of leaders say AI-enabled fraud is their #1 threat.
So everybody sees the tsunami coming.
But they haven't built the seawall. 67%, 2/3 of the industry admit they lack the data infrastructure to stop it.
That's what they call agility debt, right?
It's the interest you pay for years of fragmented legacy systems. You just cannot fight AI speed fraud with batch processing mainframes. And then regulators add another wrinkle, explainable AI.
The black box problem.
Yep. We were just praising these complex, unsupervised models, but the downside is they can be opaque. A regulator isn't going to accept the computer said so as a reason to freeze a person's life savings.
You have to show your work.
You have to show your work. It has to be transparent, auditable, and defensible. So you need a model that's complex enough to catch the bad guys, but transparent enough to explain itself to a human.
And all of this is happening while the economy is shaky, which always pushes fraud rates up.
Desperation breeds innovation in fraud, so your system has to be flexible. The fraud patterns of 2024 are not the fraud patterns of 2026.
So, to wrap this all up, we've got a March 20 deadline from Nacha that creates strict liability for scams. We have Europe demanding real-time detection. We have crypto creating all sorts of new challenges.
And we have a massive readiness gap where 2/3 of the industry admits they aren't equipped to handle the threat that they themselves ranked as #1.
It seems like the only path forward is to close that agility debt, clean up the data, deploy the new tech.
It is.
I want to leave you with one final thought, going back to that auto-generated summary feature. Think about it. We have AI detecting the fraud. We have AI guiding the investigation. And we have AI writing the final report.
The machine is handling detection, process, and documentation.
Yeah, no. What's the job of a human compliance officer in 5 years? Are we heading to a world where humans just manage the exceptions? Just audit the algorithms?
I think the role gets elevated. You start being a data gatherer and you start becoming a risk strategist. You're the one designing the parameters the AI works within. But the days of manually reviewing every single alert, those are over. The volume is just too high.
So we move from doing compliance to designing compliance.
That's the shift.
If you want to dig into the details on the Nacha rules or see the full numbers from that BNPL case study, we'll have the source links in the show notes.
Yeah, definitely check out that false pretenses rule. March 20 is coming up fast.
It is. Thanks for listening to this deep dive. Keep your data clean and your detectors running. You've been listening to What the F Happened? Fraud and Financial Crime Deconstructed, a Defend podcast by DataVisor. If you want to keep learning between episodes, check out Defend Training, a set of self-paced online courses for fraud and financial crime professionals, practical and built around real-world scenarios.
And you can earn CPE credits through the ACFE San Francisco Bay Area chapter. You can find it at datavisor.com/defendtraining. The link's in the description.
This episode's audio was generated using Google's Notebook LM, based on expert analysis and trusted sources. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.